So the year of 2023 has come to a close, and this year I've seen 81 new releases. That is a lot more than I saw in 2021 and 2022, and I actually enjoyed most of the movies I saw this year. But what were the movies that stood out to me the most as the best movies of the year? Well, I'm going to talk about that today, as I'm going to give you my picks for the 10 best movies of the year. Hi, my name is Nathan, and I talk about a bunch of movies on this channel. If you're new here, down below in the comment section, share your ranking of your 10 favorite movies of the year over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out once this video is over. If you enjoyed this video, click that like button and be sure to subscribe, because it really does help a lot. And just let me know what are your thoughts on the year of 2023 for movies in general. We're all going to have different picks because we relate to different movies, and so we have different favorite movies. So just keep that in mind, that my list is not going to be the same as yours. And with that said, let's just get straight into it. Kicking things off is Totally Killer. For me, this was just a really clever spin on the slasher genre, as instead of just being another slasher that's a revenge story, and that ends up being the motivation of the killer in this murder mystery, which Scream 6 and Thanksgiving are, I enjoyed Scream 6 and Thanksgiving, but I thought this movie was a much more different, clever spin on it, as it brings in time travel into the mix, and I think that really helps the movie, because I like time travel movies, and just the novelty of getting to see a movie that's kind of like Back to the Future as a slasher is really fun and cool to me. Also, it's just filled with a charming set of characters that they do all these wild, crazy things that teenagers probably shouldn't be doing. It is a movie with high schoolers. I am in high school, so this movie kind of just caters to me a little bit more. It has a bunch of fun scenarios, a memorable killer, and it also manages to be really funny.
Maybe if she did do blowjobs, she'd still be alive.
Let's not make that the lesson.
And it also pays a bunch of homages to Back to the Future a little bit, my favorite movie of all time. And so very much my type of thing. It's a direct-to-streaming movie, and so it's not like a theatrical release or anything like that, but I just thought this was a really solid, fun slasher film. 9. Gran Turismo, an interesting, new, and different video game adaptation in which it's an adaptation of the video game Gran Turismo, which I've never played, but it's also a biopic about a guy that played the games as a child and grew up with them and went on to become a professional racer, and that concept is inherently interesting, new, and different.
You've raced it, like 1,000 times? Now you just gotta do it in real life.
But what I really enjoyed about this particular film was that it was very emotionally compelling, where you actually cared about the characters and what happens to them. And what this movie really showed was that Neil Blomkamp has more to his bag of tricks than what he does with his other films, which are mostly sci-fi films, like District 9 and things like that. He has more to that, in which he can just make movies that are just compelling and have nice racing sequences, very simplistic story, yet executed with excellence. And I just thought Neil Blomkamp just did that really well, and it really showed that he could do more than just sci-fi, as this movie is a really huge departure from his other films. And so this was a movie that I went in with pretty much no expectations. I'd only seen the trailer a handful of times before watching it, and it ended up to be a really good emotional biopic. Number 8, Air. To me, without question, this is the movie that I have rewatched the most in the year 2023. I've seen this movie 5 times now, and every single time I have absolutely loved this movie. It takes what is potentially kind of a boring story, which is about the making of a shoe from Nike.
Got a name for it? Air Jordan.
And how Nike rose to prominence, and it's just business, people talking in offices, but it takes what should be a boring story and makes it entertaining all through the dialogue and the actors and the characters. The actors just bring a bunch of charm, humor and movie star charisma to this movie that it's just fun to see them interact. Of course, you got Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Chris Tucker, who's finally in another movie, and you just get all these people that just bring a bunch of charm to this film, just playing businessmen. And although most of this movie is people in offices trying to come up with new ideas, scheduling office meetings, it manages to be a film that actually builds a little bit of tension, and once you get to the point of satisfaction, it really does pay off. This movie just solidifies Ben Affleck as a great director and most rewatchable movie of the year, and so I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Number 7 is going to be Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse. I know a bunch of you probably have this in your top 3. You're number 1. For me, I don't go totally bananas for this film like everybody else does, but I really do think this is a fantastic, very good, great film that's an absolute worthy successor to Into the Spider-Verse, while just being a great Spider-Man movie in it of himself.
I like it a lot.
Right off the bat, there's such a great animation style, of course. If there's one thing you have to talk about when it comes to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, it has to be the animation style, where it's just really clever way of animating things, the combination of 2D and 3D, kind of what they did in Into the Spider-Verse, but this one just takes it to the next level, where it does all this creative things with the Spider Society, different universes, all that kind of stuff. But really, what stood out to me about this movie was that it dived into a different aspect of Spider-Man we didn't explore previously in previous films. It explores the loneliness and the toll that being Spider-Man takes. And because of that, it's a much sadder Spider-Man movie than some of the previous Spider-Man movies. And it also just carries a large emotional weight with it, so even it being a part 1, it still manages to be just as emotional as you want to. For me, if you're wondering, the reason I don't have this one in my top 5 or top 3, and I don't like to criticize movies that I include in my top 10, but for me it's just harder to evaluate this particular film because it is a part 1 and it just ends so hard on the cliffhanger, and so depending on how Beyond the Spider-Verse does, I will probably like this movie more or less depending on how it does. But as of right now, I still do think this is a fantastic Spider-Man movie. Number 6 is Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's thought-provoking epic biopic about Oppenheimer and the making of the atomic bomb. Ends up to be another Christopher Nolan triumph.
You did it! Congratulations!
Where this movie is mostly people in Senate meetings, hearings, people at tables discussing ideas and having conversations, and it doesn't have to rely on a bomb spectacle to be great. The movie is about the making of the atomic bomb, and the trailers sell a bunch of shots where a bomb is exploding, but that's really only less than 1 minute of the entire film is when the actual nuclear bomb explodes. And that's what I really enjoy about it, is that it didn't have to rely on big gigantic explosion spectacle to be a tense, thrilling film, because it does the tense, thrilling film much like Air, all through dialogue. But beyond that, it's just a nice character exploration of Oppenheimer. It doesn't treat him as this fully brilliant man that could do amazing things in the world of science. It also treats him as a flawed person who has some second thoughts about the atom bomb and like rethinks some of his choices. He has kind of a character arc throughout the film, and it's effectively horrifying at times, all just through people talking and things like that. And so for me, very good Nolan triumph. Maybe not the most rewatchable film on this list, but I still think that this is a great film. Moving into our top 5, The Color Purple. Just as a point of reference, I have never read the book The Color Purple. I have never seen Steven Spielberg's adaptation of The Color Purple in 1985. I just went into this movie not even knowing really what it was about. I'd only seen the trailer a handful of times, and this movie manages to be one of the most gut-wrenching movies of the year, while also being one of the most uplifting movies of the year. And I thought this movie just had a great balance between those two aspects. You have a character and you're following her throughout the span of decades as she's living this very miserable life that she wishes could be better, with a character that's just beating her, talking her down, doing the most harsh and abrasive things to her, something that you absolutely hate, but there's always this hopefulness and sense of uplifting tone to it, where it never just descends into full darkness. Because when the satisfying things happen, like, you actually feel large senses of emotions, and this movie hits every single satisfying note that you want it to hit. Everything that's set up in the first act is properly developed and paid off by the end of the film. It's a movie that's so good that every character has some sort of a character arc, and it has great character journeys for especially the guy that I mentioned earlier that's just so harsh and abrasive. He actually goes on a character journey and he becomes kind of a good guy, kind of a likable person by the end of it, in a way that's totally believable. And so that's what I thoroughly enjoyed about this movie. It was emotional, it could be funny at times, it could be gut-wrenching, and it kind of just drew up all the emotions that you want this movie to build up. For The Creator, a large, epic sci-fi original story from Gareth Edwards, the director of Godzilla 2014 and Rogue One, and I just thought this was a really, really good movie. I know a lot of you probably were disappointed with this movie, but that's probably because all of you went in with really high expectations and got lower results. As for me, the way I went into this movie was not really with high expectations. I had only seen the trailer like less than 3 times, and those were only in the theater. And I went in with fairly mid expectations, and it ended up being really good to me.
So good.
And so maybe that's why I love this movie so much. But this movie in general was just really good to me, as it has an emotional character journey for John David Washington's character that really, and the movie really builds out the bond between him and this child, and he's conflicted on whether he should do the legal thing or if he should do the illegal thing, because he cares about this child so much. It builds the bond between each other so well. And so when you get those sense of gut-wrenching emotions by the end of the movie, it really pays off and it feels earned. Beyond that, the movie visually just looks great, as this movie was made for under $100 million, and it just looks fantastic. And I really don't understand most of the other movies this year, like the Marvels, cost more than $200 million to make, and that movie has some pretty obvious green screen in the background. And so this is a movie that I just love, that we got an original sci-fi story this year, and as somebody that went in with lower expectations than all you, I loved this movie. Kicking off the top 3 movies of the year, John Wick Chapter 4. This movie, without question, has easily the best action sequences of the entire year, as all the stunt choreographing stuff is all fully on display. And this is a franchise known for how great their action sequences, how stylized they are, how well choreographed they are, and this movie, I would arguably say, is the best choreographed movie in the John Wick franchise, with the best action sequences out of all of them, in which case by the time you get to the end of it, it's like a 50-minute action sequence. But beyond that, this movie just tells a really strong story, where it's meant to be sort of a conclusion for John Wick, and it manages to be a satisfying one, as John Wick, it closes out his character journey really well, as it's about him and him realizing that he can't really have his peace anymore. All he was looking for in his life was peace, and he learns that that time has passed and his peace is with his wife, and so he ends up dying at the end, and it manages to be a satisfying conclusion, because we have a John Wick 5 coming out. But beyond that, we just get some great new characters in this franchise as they introduce Donnie Yen as Kane. Just a really cool character to have in this movie. But also, even the villain, I think, stands out the most of all our John Wick villains, as you have Bill Skarsgård as this completely cruel character. And despite this movie being 2 hours and 50 minutes, I feel like it just flew by and it just felt timeless. I've seen this movie twice, and even the second time when I knew everything was going to happen, it still felt like it was moving at such a brisk pace. And so, as somebody that loves action movies, John Wick Chapter 4 was a really good one to me. Our runner-up is going to be Godzilla -1. I've never particularly been a huge Godzilla fan. The only Godzilla movies I've seen are the ones in the MonsterVerse with 2014 King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. But I would say that I absolutely loved this movie, and just looking back on it, I remember the really, really good things about this movie, in which case I went into it with kind of a whim, and what this movie did was that it was a very human and emotional story while also delivering all the Godzilla carnage that I wanted. And the human and emotional side to it is the part that I was really not expecting, as you actually care about the characters, in particular our lead character, who deals with severe cases of survivor's guilt and PTSD due to a horrific event that happened to him in the opening sequence of this movie. And by the end of it, you realize this movie didn't really need to kill any characters off in order to have those big dramatic emotions that you want a movie to have, and that I really wasn't expecting this movie to have. It could just be compelling on a human level while also being a Godzilla film. And with the Godzilla carnage itself, it delivers some of the most terrifying Godzilla stuff that we have seen on the big screen. Godzilla himself is probably more horrific and terrifying in this movie than he is in any of the Hollywood Godzilla films, as every time he does that whole nuclear blast thing, it's on the edge of my seat, really tense, and it portrays Godzilla as just this monster that needs to be stopped. And I loved this movie. And getting into more foreign films, this is my favorite foreign film of the year. But my favorite movie of the year, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, and I would safely say this is the best and most memorable film in the Mission Impossible franchise.
It's the best. I love it.
With all the other Mission Impossible films, you tend to really enjoy them while watching them, but you tend to not really remember the specific plot details in those movies. And with this movie, I actually remembered the plot details, the one about AI, and the actual villain. And it's a very simple story, but because you care about these characters so much, and because we have such a long history with them, this movie has some really emotional sequences that are earned because of that. Because Ethan Hunt really cares about his friends, and the audience really cares about Ethan Hunt and his friends. This movie has some really gut-wrenching moments. There's a big standout one to me. And also, this movie, to me, just was a more personal story with Ethan Hunt, as it has a villain that ties into his past. It's more like in the background of this movie, but I hope it's fleshed out more in part 2, and I just thought in this movie it was also done really, really well. And with this movie, of course, you gotta talk about the stunts. With any Mission Impossible movie, any Tom Cruise movie, there's some sort of stunt that really stands out, and with this movie, they're just all throughout the movie. But the best part of all these memorable, crazy stunts that are pulled off in this movie is that they feel believable. In a year where we get movies full of CGI, full of fake stunts, full of stuntmen, this movie has Tom Cruise actually doing crazy things on the screen. It doesn't require tons of CGI like a bunch of films that have come out in the year 2023. And that's what made this movie so immersive to me. I didn't see it in anything special, no IMAX, no nothing. I just saw it on a regular movie theater screen, and I loved what they did with the stunts here, where it just felt more believable than most of the movies that we've seen this year. And although this movie is a part 1, and I mentioned this before with Across the Spiderverse, where it like cuts off and we have to wait for the next film for me to fully evaluate it, this movie I can confidently fully evaluate it because it's a satisfying conclusion, although it is a part 1. The characters in the movie did exactly what they set out to do, and it has just enough emotion, just enough of an arc for characters like Grace, where I just really enjoyed what they did there. And so for me, this is everything I wanted from a Mission Impossible movie, and everything I wanted from an action movie in general, while also delivering so much more, so it is my favorite movie of the year. There you have it, those are my picks. Down below in the comment section, share your picks over on my channel. I have more content like this, check those out right now. Click that like button and be sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end, and I will see you in the next one.